One of the latest developments in connection with the Brent Thomas matter, it's being reported this morning that the Attorney General, Reginald Armour, says he's going ahead with the state's case against Brent Thomas, noting that the recent decision by the Barbados government to accept liability in the lawsuit involving his extradition from that island to Trinidad and Tobago in 2022 has no impact on the case against him here. Mr. George, good morning.
Yeah, hi, good morning to you, Marlon, and good morning, Trinidad and Tobago.
Yes, Mr. George, always very good to speak with you. It has been a long time, so it's really a pleasure speaking with you this morning concerning this matter. Well, as I said, there have been major developments concerning this matter. The Barbados government has accepted a liability in connection with this matter. We're now seeing this morning that the Attorney General is now saying that in spite of that matter, that he is going ahead with the state's case against Mr. Thomas. Mr. George, how do you see all of this?
Well, I think there's another interesting aspect of what the Attorney General said. He also said that he is sure that the Barbados Attorney General is acting in Barbados's best interest. So my question that I'd like to posit this morning, Marlon, would be, who is acting in Trinidad and Tobago's best interest? Because I think that's something that we really need to consider. Because if you think of it, Marlon, the role of your Attorney General is one where the Attorney General is the second most important member of your cabinet. Remember, under your constitution, under the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago, you cannot form a cabinet without having two positions filled. That's Prime Minister and Attorney General. In fact, you can have a cabinet with Prime Minister and Attorney General alone. That's all you need constitutionally to form a cabinet. So that's the importance that the Constitution has ascribed to the role of Attorney General. And when you are Attorney General, you are Attorney General for the nation. You are not Attorney General for a political party or for your side, so to speak. You are supposed to take a holistic overall view of things and be able to say, well, look, these decisions I am making are in the best interest of Trinidad and Tobago, not in the best interest of a political party or, one side of the aisle in the parliament. You are supposed to be bigger than that. You are supposed to rise above that. Otherwise, you could end up in a scenario as we saw, for instance, under the dispensation of Mr. Donald Trump when he was president. You saw how he weaponized the Justice Department in the U.S. And in fact, he said the Attorney General must be his Attorney General to do what he wants. And you saw how he tried to use the office of Attorney General to go after his political opponents, right? And William Barr, who was then Attorney General, was in supine genuflection before Trump. He was not standing up independently and robustly to say, well, look, I am Attorney General for all of the country. He acted as if he was Mr. Trump's lackey. And that's the problem that you see sometimes where you don't have that robust independence in the office of Attorney General, where someone is able to stand up and say, hey, listen, despite what, the political persuasions are, this is what is in the best interest of the country. Now, contrast it with Merrick Garland, who is now Attorney General in the U.S. You see how he has stayed out of the political limelight. He has thought to act with an even hand, even in situations where, for instance, matters have to be dealt with former President Trump and stuff like that. He still tries to show that balance and that non-partisan approach. And that is what is important. Because, Marlon, when one looks at the judgment of Justice Rampersad, it is a seminal piece of judgment. And it is, a comprehensive condemnation of the actions of the agents and officers of the state of Trinidad and Tobago. And, of course, yes, the doors of the Court of Appeal are always open to anyone, regardless of how, unmeritorious one's claim may be. They don't stop you at the door. Of course, if it is that you get inside and your argument proves to be without merit, they will quickly show you the exit, but they don't disallow entry. So we sometimes have to think and step back and maybe take mature, reasonable positions, as we have seen with the Barbados Attorney General, who said, look, hey, having looked at this, and having gotten the advice of counsel, because he did get the advice of counsel, he said, look, I think that we have to concede this matter. Send us your proposals as to quantum of costs.
But
in
Mr.
Trinidad
George,
and Tobago, let me tell you, Marlon, years ago, just let me make this point. Years ago, there used to be that type of maturity and I would say reasonableness that one would have seen attendant upon the offices of the Attorney General, offices of the Chief State Solicitor, whereby they would take these type of mature, reasonable positions. Unfortunately, Trinidad and Tobago has fallen into the type of Donald Trump playbook, whereby we seem to think that the role of an Attorney General is to prop up his political party and those who politically appointed him, and basically, act, in a manner that is bowing and scraping obsequiously to those who appointed him.
But, Mr. George, what gives the impression to you that the AG may not be seeking the best interest of this country in connection with this matter?
I have not said so. I've never said so. Mm-hmm. I've raised a question based upon what he had said. Mm-hmm. So, it's for us as a nation to sit and analyze and assess it and determine the answer to that question, if you understand. Yes. I would never be so presumptuous to make a statement such as that, but I've raised that question because, you see, we have to sometimes, Marlon, rise above the political partisanship in this country and see, well, okay, look, hey, overall, what is the best interest of TNT in this scenario? Separate and apart from your yellow jersey or your red jersey, let's start thinking nationally as to what we want as a country, because we can't build a better country, Marlon, if we keep doing the same thing over and over again. We have descended into the political gutter, basically, here in Trinidad and Tobago, where everything you see from our leaders is an attack against one side or the other. That's all it ends up being, So it's an attack and a reprisal and a response, and, it's a finger pointing. Well, when you were in office, you did this too, so why are you complaining? And listen, we are not going to progress or advance if we continue down that road. And we, the citizens, you, Marlon, as a television host, we are the ones who are supposed to really call upon our leaders and hold them to account and say, hey, listen, this has to stop. We really need to start focusing on what's best for Trinidad and Tobago.
Well, over the past few days, since the situation in Barbados, or should I say the government of Barbados admitting to liability in connection with this matter, a former police commissioner, Gary Griffith, has said that the Barbados government's admission of guilt in the Brent Thomas abduction will now reveal the Trinidad and Tobago government minister who authorized the abduction. And I think that what Mr. Griffith has been saying for a while now is for the police, Trinidad and Tobago police, to go to Barbados and arrest Mr. Thomas and to bring him back home. Of course, someone in the government must have known about this, and also at that time the police commissioner. Your perspective on that, Mr. George?
Well, the thing is, I wouldn't comment on what Mr. Griffith has said because, he is also wearing a political hat.
Yes.
But I can speak generally in terms of the circumstances where even the office of police commissioner is supposed to be one that is free and devoid of political direction, political, guidance, or, political persuasion. You, as Commissioner of Police, you must always show that you are thinking and acting independently. You are not even supposed to act on the dictates of the minister. The minister can provide guidance and, general policy frameworks for you, but at the end of the day, even that office must never become politicized, because the minute we go down that road, Marlon, there is, it's a very slippery slope, because then you can have politically motivated investigations being launched. We've seen it in other countries. You see how things happen in Pakistan. Look at Imran Khan, former famous world-class cricketer. I mean, there's no end to investigations being launched against him in Pakistan. You see how it happens in Haiti. You see how it happens in so many other countries. Look, even right now in India, there are complaints because of the upcoming elections. They're saying that, Modi and his cronies are launching investigation after investigation against their political opponents, and the police are complicit in it. So we in Trinidad and Tobago have to understand the dangers of going down that road, and we have to be able to say, hey, listen, we want to have independence of mind, independence of thought, independence of action in these high-profile offices. Even the office of the DPP is one that is constitutionally protected, and we must always ensure that that is an office that is free from political, influence. Mr. Roger Gaspard in the role has, displayed tremendous independence in that role. In fact, he has actually, incurred the ire and the wrath of the government at times, where it seems that, they are not happy with some of the decisions that he has taken. But, the point is, clearly he's not under any political control in that regard. And these are the institutions we have to preserve if we want to build a successful nation. You look at what, you see for, the models of successful nations, Marlon. I've used Singapore as an example so many times, but the point is they have ensured that they put a framework in place for building blocks for success. And it is by stamping out the corruption, by ensuring that they hold persons accountable. Accountable to the point where even, like when I was last there, one of the drivers told me, he said, listen, even your cars are registered with the Ministry of Transport, whereby your car will report on you if you break a red light. Your car will send a message to the authorities if you exceed the speed limit. Of course, maybe that might be an excessive level of control and people may say it's an invasion of privacy. But you see, the fact is there has to be a balance and a trade-off at some point. We cannot encourage lawlessness and, a laissez-faire, corrupt system and then expect to build a proper nation. We can't have it both ways.
But Mr. George, I think it is safe to say that there are clouds again over the conduct of the members of the police service. Judging from what you are seeing and hearing coming out in connection with this matter, what's your take on that, on what is being said about the police in connection with this matter?
Well, Marlon, unfortunately, the history of the police service in Trinidad and Tobago, if one goes back even to the days of Mr. Randolph Burrows and the infamous flying squad, we would recognize that we have had challenges with the conduct of the police service and the conduct of officers in the police service. Now, the reality is that this particular scenario may be one where they were acting under dictates or orders, from, other persons. It could very well be. But then again, the question is, when you go to the top of the TTPS, do you take dictates from a minister or do you act independently? You see, these are questions that must be answered. They must be answered. And you have to ensure that whenever you do things, it can withstand scrutiny. The role of the Police Service Commission is supposed to be acting as an oversight body, right? But it's only limited to the offices of the commissioner and the deputy commissioners of police. And it's only in a scenario where, for instance, either they decide of their own volition to investigate something or a complaint is brought to their attention that they can then, launch an investigation of this nature. But the reality is that we have seen repeatedly, egregious abuses of the authority of the police in Trinidad and Tobago. And I think it's only when we start seeing a scenario where police officers are made personally to pay for their sins and omissions that you will see a reduction and maybe a cessation of these types of things. I remember Justice Frank Sipasad some years ago advocated for that. He said that, I think there was a matter he was dealing with, and, when he looked at the conduct of the police, he made the comment that, look, we need to start looking at a scenario where we can make these officers personally accountable. So in other words, let them pay. So you make an award where the state has to pay, $250,000 or $500,000. You attach it to that police officer who you can hold culpable, solely culpable, and fully culpable for the action, and you say he's the one who has to now pay that. And that, I think, will start bringing about a change. Because unless we start doing that, we are not going to see an improvement. You saw, for instance, the George Floyd scenario in the U.S., where the police officers were then prosecuted, and then now some of them are actually facing civil suits because of their actions, and that's in their personal capacities, So we may have to start looking at some type of scenario such as that, because generally we have a blanket scenario where the state, through the Office of the Attorney General, usually assumes the responsibility for the defense of these police officers, and then now the state is saddled with the liability and burden whenever there's a judgment, against the police officers. It's the state that takes on that burden, and the state has to pay. Yes. We have to start making the individual officers liable, and then you will see change start to happen.
Yeah. Well, Mr. George, I suspect that's all a part of the discussion on constitutional reform, right?
Well, of course, these are things that, we can, of course, inject into the conversation. But, the reality of the history of constitutional reform in Trinidad and Tobago is that, it has been largely all talk and no action. To put it as simply and probably as bluntly and as crudely as possible. And one would not ever want to use those terms to describe a process as important as that. But when one looks at our history, we love to speak, on the platform and, make these nice promises. Yes, we will have constitutional reform. But then the effect of it is that you have a big, thick document that just sits gathering dust somewhere and is usually never implemented, because the political to-in and fro-in that takes place thereafter for the implementation of these very good measures. Usually you have very good recommendations. Members of the public come out, they participate, and it's almost painful sometimes, Marlon, to see that, people take it seriously. They come out with their suggestions. You see people with a nice long list of recommendations and ideas which can really contribute to making this country a better place. But the politicians, for their own reasons, they end up making this exercise a charade, and they engage in shenanigans, and it's just really for public consumption as a PR stunt to make it appear that, well, look, we tried to do something, but then they will point fingers and say, well, the other side didn't agree and they didn't want this, and then when the tables are turned and the roles are reversed, the finger pointing continues. And Marlon, that has been the history of Trinidad and Tobago. And we as citizens, we need to recognize where we are. We are in a non-stop cycle, a revolving door of politicians who are not advancing the interests of Trinidad and Tobago generally, but they are seeking really to advance their own political agendas.
You have spoken quite a lot this morning about the independence of certain offices. But how do you gain that independence where, and I'm talking in a general sense now, in the case of, let's say, the Office of the Attorney General, a politician picks that person. When it comes to the post of a police commissioner, the politicians, they have a great role on who the police commissioner would be, in spite of what they would want to say. But how do you create that real sense of independence? And there has to be some greater checks and balances between the offices of the politician and such high offices as, let's say, the DPP, the police commissioner, and the attorney general.
Right. So, I mean, two good examples that we have would be the office of the DPP and the office of police commissioner, where you are insulated from political removal. You're not insulated from political pressure,
yes,
but you're insulated from political removal, right? Now, the Attorney General, however, is a position where you are politically appointed and you are politically removed. If you recall, under the regime of former Prime Minister Basdeo Pandey, when his then Attorney General Ramesh Lawrence Maharaj, started enacting legislation and, taking stances which appeared to be at odds with the government, that was a situation that created tremendous discomfort for Mr. Pandey. And, eventually he and Mr. Maharaj had the biggest falling out, and of course, as Prime Minister, you could, appoint and you can also disappoint. And, that is what we have seen happen on more than one occasion in Trinidad and Tobago, where attorneys general have been removed from office by the political directorate. So the Office of Attorney General maybe is something that we ought to look at afresh and maybe try to see how we can provide some constitutional insulations for that office. But then again, in that case, we will then have to change the way the Attorney General is appointed and make it a more bipartisan approach, whereby you will have both sides being able to have a say in the choice of who's Attorney General, and then you protect that office to say, well, look, hey, you cannot just remove him because you, the Prime Minister, or you, the government, don't like, what he says or what he does, because it's not in alignment with your political persuasion.
Yeah.
So, I mean, these are things we can look at and find ways and mechanisms to insulate those offices. Of course, if you are a strong, independent individual, you can exercise that independence. But of course, you bear in mind that you are walking a fine line, and it's a precarious position where you could be removed, at the whim and fancy of those who have politically appointed you.
Yeah. Mr. George, we just have about a minute again. What do you see in the coming days, in the weeks, in the coming months concerning this matter, concerning Mr. Brent Thomas? How is it all going to end?
Well, I mean, it's before the Court of Appeal, so, I mean, one cannot comment on the nuts and bolts of the matter. We have to await the decision of the Court of Appeal in it. But what I would say, Marlon, is that we have to think in terms of a more holistic and, overarching approach to the way the state handles these types of matters, whereby we can see that type of maturity, and I will say it's maturity, that was exercised and displayed by the Attorney General of Barbados, where basically having looked at it, if it is that upon advice you recognize you were wrong, then you say, hey, listen, all right, a mistake was made. We are all human. And, that's what some of our leaders don't seem to understand. The population will recognize and understand. If you come forward and you make a mea culpa and say, hey, listen, I made a mistake, I was wrong, they will understand and say, okay, all right, let's move on, that kind of thing. But, we have persons who, they love to be these tin gods, and wrong and strong. And you're going down to the end, despite the fact that, it's as clear as day, you say, no, it wasn't me. You see the video and your face is there on the video. You as a politician, you come out, you say, it wasn't me. These are the types of things we have tolerated in Trinidad and Tobago, Marlon. And it's on both sides. Huh? It's not one political party alone. It's both sides. And we, the public, have to be the vanguard. And we have to be the ones who eventually draw a line in the sand and say, hey, listen, this has to stop. We need to change direction. We need to change course. Because if it is that we do not do so, then we basically are going to reach what, has been described as the tipping point in our nation's history whereby we may reach a point of no return.
Yeah, Martin George, it's always a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you for spending some time with us this morning. We do appreciate it. Bye for now. Have a good holiday tomorrow.
It's a pleasure. And a good one. Thank you. Thank you. Same to you. Thanks.
All right. We are going to a very short break. We're coming back, everybody.